You have been trying to change your behavior for years. Different strategies, different systems, different levels of commitment and enthusiasm and resolve. And some of it has worked for a while. You have had periods of genuine progress, moments where the new version of yourself felt real and close and sustainable. And then something pulled you back. Not dramatically, not in a single moment of weakness you can point to and explain. Just a slow, almost gravitational return to the familiar, to the patterns, to the person you were before you decided to be different. And somewhere in that return, a quiet and damaging conclusion began to form, that this is simply who you are. That change is available to some people but not fully to you. By the end of this video, you will understand why that conclusion is wrong. Not as encouragement, as a precise psychological argument. You will understand why behavior change fails when it is approached as behavior change. And you will understand what the identity switch actually is, why it is the only intervention that reaches deep enough to produce lasting transformation, and why most people have been solving the wrong problem their entire lives. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you will be uncomfortable before it is liberating. The reason your attempts at change keep reverting is not that you are weak. It is not that you need stronger willpower or better habits or more accountability. The reason is simpler and stranger than any of those. You have been trying to act like a different person while remaining, at the level of your deepest self-concept, exactly the same person you have always been. And the self-concept always wins. Not because it is right, because it is older and deeper and more fundamental than any conscious intention sitting on top of it. Most people believe that if they change what they do, they will eventually change who they are. The identity switch says the opposite is true. And until you understand why, you will keep running the same experiment and wondering why it keeps producing the same result. Let us go there. Consider the way identity actually functions in human psychology. Your sense of who you are is not a neutral observation. It is an active filter, a continuously operating system that interprets incoming information, shapes perception, and guides behavior in ways that are largely invisible to conscious awareness. Your identity does not just describe you, prescribes you. It decides, before you are even aware of the decision, what is possible for you, what is appropriate for you, what is consistent with the kind of person you understand yourself to be. When that filter is working in your favor, it is extraordinarily powerful. The person who genuinely identifies as a runner does not negotiate with themselves every morning about whether to put on their shoes. The question is already settled at a level below conscious deliberation. Running is simply what they do, because it is simply who they are. But when the filter is working against you, it is equally powerful in the other direction. The person who identifies, even quietly and partially, as someone who struggles with discipline, as someone who is not naturally focused, as someone who has never quite been able to sustain the things that matter, that identity does not sit passively in the background. It actively shapes every attempt at change. It introduces doubt before effort begins. It interprets setbacks as confirmation rather than information. It makes the return to old patterns feel not like failure but like homecoming, like the inevitable resolution of a temporary deviation from who you really are. This is the mechanism that explains the gravitational pull. The reason change so often feels effortful in a way that is fundamentally different from ordinary effort. You are not just working against inertia. You are working against a self-concept that is actively organizing your experience around a different conclusion. And this is why the identity switch is not a metaphor. It is not an inspirational reframe designed to make you feel better. It is a precise psychological intervention that targets the only layer of the system deep enough to produce durable change. The switch begins with a question that most people have never genuinely asked themselves. Not who do I want to become, though that matters, but who am I currently being? Not in the abstract, in the specific texture of your daily experience. in the micro-decisions and habitual responses and automatic interpretations that constitute your actual lived reality from moment to moment. Because most people have a significant gap between their stated identity and their operational identity. They say, "I am someone who values health," while their daily choices reflect an identity that prioritizes comfort and convenience. They say, "I am someone who takes their work seriously," while their relationship with distraction tells a different story. They say, "I am someone who is growing," while their behavior reveals a person primarily organized around the avoidance of discomfort. These gaps are not evidence of hypocrisy. They are evidence of an identity that has not yet fully incorporated the new information, the new intention, the new understanding of what is possible. The identity switch is the deliberate act of closing that gap, not by forcing new behaviors and hoping the identity follows, but by working directly on the identity itself. By asking with genuine seriousness, what would a person who is already the version of me I am trying to become, what would that person believe about themselves? How would they interpret difficulty? How would they make decisions in the moments when no one is watching? What story do they carry about their own capabilities and their own right to occupy the life they want? And then beginning to inhabit that story, not as performance, not as pretense, but as a genuine hypothesis about who you are that you are committed to testing through your behavior. This is a subtle but enormous distinction. The person who performs a new identity is always aware of the gap between the performance and the reality. They feel like an imposter. They are waiting to be found out. And the moment the performance becomes too costly, they drop it and return to what feels true. But the person who inhabits a new identity as a genuine hypothesis is doing something different. They are not claiming to have already arrived. They are claiming to be in the process of becoming. And every action consistent with the new identity is understood not as proof of arrival, but as evidence, as one more data point accumulating in favor of a different self-concept. James Clear articulated something related to this when he wrote about identity-based habits. He described every action as a vote for the type of person you wish to become. But the identity switch goes further than that framing, because it is not just about accumulating votes. It is about changing the voter, about intervening at the level of the belief system that determines which votes feel natural and which feel forced. Because here is the thing about votes that most people miss. You do not vote randomly. You vote consistently with who you already believe yourself to be. And until that belief changes, the voting pattern will not sustainably change either. You will cast new votes for a while, through willpower and intention and external accountability. And then the old belief will reassert itself, as beliefs always do, and the voting pattern will return to its prior state. The identity switch changes the belief first, and the behavior follows not as an act of discipline, but as an expression of a new understanding of the self. How does this actually happen? How do you change a belief that has been operating in you for years, perhaps decades, without your conscious awareness or consent? It happens through what might be called identity anchors. Specific, deliberate, repeated experiences that provide genuine evidence for the new self-concept. Not affirmations. Not declarations of who you intend to be. Actual evidence. Actual moments in which you behaved consistently with the new identity under real conditions in the face of real resistance. Every time you do the thing that the person you are becoming would do, and you do it without the full support of motivation or certainty or external reward, you are installing an anchor. A memory that the new self-concept can point to as proof of its validity. And those anchors accumulate, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but with a compounding quality that eventually tips the balance between the old identity and the new one. There is also something that might be called identity language. The specific words you use when you describe yourself to yourself and to others. Not in the performative sense of affirmations, but in the ordinary, casual self-description that happens constantly in the course of daily life. When someone offers you food you are trying not to eat, and you say, "I cannot eat that," you are describing an external constraint. A rule imposed on a person whose natural desire is still to eat it. But when you say, "I do not eat that," something subtly different is happening. You are describing the behavior of a person for whom this choice is simply consistent with who they are. One phrase positions you outside your goal, straining against it. The other positions you inside your identity, expressing it. These distinctions seem small. They are not small. Language is not just how we describe reality. It is one of the primary tools through which we construct it. The words you habitually use to describe yourself shape, over time, the self-concept you inhabit. And the self-concept you inhabit shapes everything downstream. There is also the question of environment. Because identity does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in context. And certain contexts make certain identities easier to inhabit than others. The person trying to build a new identity as someone who reads deeply and thinks carefully will find that identity much harder to inhabit in an environment saturated with notifications and noise and the constant low-level demand of digital stimulation. This is not an excuse. It is a design principle. If you understand that your environment is either supporting or undermining your target identity, you become responsible for shaping it. Not perfectly, not without compromise, but with the intention of someone who understands that the context in which you spend your hours is one of the most powerful identity-shaping forces available to you. And then there is perhaps the most confronting aspect of the identity switch, the question of what you have to let go of. Because identity is not just addition. Sometimes it is subtraction. Sometimes the person you are trying to become is genuinely incompatible with certain aspects of who you have been. Certain social roles. Certain self-deprecating stories you have told for so long they feel like personality rather than habit. Certain relationships where the dynamic depends on you remaining a particular version of yourself that the new identity has outgrown. The identity switch does not require you to abandon your past or your people. But it does require you to stop letting the past have the final word on who you are now. To recognize that the self-concept you inherited, from your upbringing, your experiences, your failures, your fears, is not a fixed truth about your nature. It is a working model. And working models can be updated when new evidence arrives. You are not the person you were 10 years ago. You are not even the person you were at the beginning of this video. Understanding has arrived, perspective has shifted, and with it, the possibility of a different relationship with your own identity. A more deliberate one, a more honest one in which you are the author of your self-concept rather than simply its subject. That authorship is what the identity switch offers. Not a guarantee of transformation, but the genuine possibility of one. Grounded in a clear-eyed understanding of how change actually works, how deep it has to reach, and what it costs and what it gives back to become someone new. You already sense who that person is. You have felt glimpses of them, in your best moments, in the hours when everything aligned and you were fully present and fully capable and fully yourself in a way that felt both familiar and slightly out of reach. That person is not a future possibility. They are a present reality waiting for the identity to catch up. Begin the switch. Not tomorrow. Here. With the quiet, serious decision to stop describing yourself as someone who struggles with this, and to start inhabiting the person for whom this is simply naturally what they do. The behavior will follow. It always follows. When the identity is real. If something in this reached you, if it names something you have been circling for a long time, take a moment to leave a like. Costs nothing and it matters more than you know. And if you want to keep exploring ideas like these, ideas about identity, transformation, and the deep psychology of becoming, Audiobook Studio has more here whenever you are ready. Subscribe if it feels right. There is always something worth returning to.